Welcome everyone. In this video I'm doing a review of the Xbox Series X. This is the most powerful Xbox ever created to date, and in fact, if you look at the specs on paper, it's slightly more powerful than the PlayStation 5. We'll go over the hardware design and then quickly glance over the interface and what it looks like when using it, gaming performance, which is the most important, and then of course what it's like as a media player, because it seems like every reviewer online seems to forget that this is a very capable media player. The console is large and heavy, and the same can be said about its price tag. Here in Canada, it's a whopping $599, and in the US is $499. And just simply looking at the console at first glance, you would think that it kind of gives you the vibe of a small gaming PC tower, which I kind of dig. The console looks best when it's placed vertically, but it's too large to place in most home theater stands. This is a similar problem as the PlayStation 5, which is significantly taller than the Xbox Series X. You can place the Series X on its side, but it looks odd because of the permanent base that'll be present on one side. This makes it look like the console was tipped over by somebody and you were just too lazy to stand it back up and fix it. At the top of the console is where ventilation is present, because this is where hot air is pushed out to keep the system cool. That green color you see inside is just paint. It's not actually RGB lighting. Now I had one major concern if you leave this console standing up vertically, and that's if you leave it sitting idly for a few periods at a time in a week, because dust will get in easily and that could overheat the system. Now I do realize that some PC towers have a similar design, but the thing with PCs is that you can usually just open it up, clean it out, no problem. With opening the Xbox, you could most likely void the warranty and you can be in big trouble if you screw something up. But I did a lot of research on this, and one thing I noticed is that the fan that comes inside the console is incredibly large. In fact, the blades itself are designed so that they nearly overlap one another, so dust to get in and slide down is pretty slim. The fan itself, thankfully, runs incredibly quiet. And it runs slightly cooler than the Xbox One X, surprisingly. Even when pushing the Series X console to its limit with games such as Watch Dogs Legion, the air coming out is warm but never hot. Inside for additional cooling is also a massive heat sink, split motherboards for better airflow, and a vapor chamber. Switching over to the exterior of the console, at the front is the power button, a controller pairing button, a 4K Blu-ray optical drive, and a USB 3.1 port. At the back is a port for a lock, such as a Kensington lock, two more USB 3.1 ports, ports for Ethernet, power, and HDMI 2.1. The disappointing thing about all the USB ports is that they're all USB-A fitting and not USB-C. Continuing on the back is a slot for a 1TB Seagate storage expansion card, which replicates the console's built-in custom SSD. Keep in mind that this expansion card is very expensive. Especially here in Canada, is $299, whereas in the US is $219. This Seagate expansion card expands the total storage, which means you can store Xbox Series games on it. If you do use your own external USB storage, you can certainly do that to store older games from, like, say, Xbox One, but you can't store Xbox Series X games on your external storage, and any game that you have from Xbox One that's upgraded to Series X won't be compatible. In terms of connectivity, it supports Wi-Fi 5 and not Wi-Fi 6, which is incredibly disappointing. If you need to know what Wi-Fi 6 is, I have another video explaining that. Link to that is in the video description. Another disappointing thing about connectivity is the lack of Bluetooth. Yup, here in 2020, Microsoft still doesn't want to include Bluetooth in their console. So this means that if you have a Bluetooth wireless headset and you want to use it for private listening, not that easy. There's some workaround methods, but it means you have to kind of buy some adapters or spend more money, basically. There's no easy way to mirror your cell phone onto the Xbox, like, say, Chromecast technology, but that's not really important here, but it's just something I wanted to mention. The controller is very similar to the one that comes with One X, but it has a textured design at the back, which kind of gives you slightly better grip. Another disappointing thing from Microsoft is that this controller requires two AA batteries to power it. Why doesn't this controller include a rechargeable battery kit? No clue. Although I have to admit, I'm quite happy with the controller design in terms of comfort and button placement, as it's very similar to the One X's design, and that was a rock solid controller. The main addition to the Series X controller is a dedicated share button at the center, which basically allows you to share your gaming content online rather quickly. Thankfully for some people, all the Xbox One accessories, except for the Kinect, are compatible with the Series X. The initial setup of the console was incredibly easy and is done through the Xbox mobile app. During the setup, the app will ask you to carry over any saved settings from your Xbox One, for example. If you have your previous Xbox on the same network as the Series X, you can transfer the games from the old console to the Series X over your local network for a fast and easy transfer. This is much better than downloading games over the internet all over again. Switching to the software, the main interface is almost identical to the one on Xbox One consoles. There's nothing new and groundbreaking here, but this is okay as the interface is simple, fun, and effective. It's possible Microsoft didn't want to upgrade the interface because it has very similar elements to Windows 10. Let's move on to what people care about most, gaming. At launch, there are no exclusives, but there are some Xbox One games upgraded to Series X performance for 4K HDR gaming at 60 frames a second. In some cases, there are 4K games at 120 frames per second. To know which ones have been upgraded for the Series S or X, I'm reviewing the X, just simply look for the Series XS symbol when downloading a game. The downside to playing in 120 frames per second is that for most of those games, you'll have to sacrifice on resolution and gaming graphics. I honestly found 4K 60 frames per second to be the sweet spot for great graphics and smooth gameplay. With the option for gamers to choose higher frames per second over better graphics or vice versa, it seems like this Xbox is getting closer to PC gaming territory than ever before. But that's a good thing because customization should always be up to the user. There's one more thing that goes hand in hand with the Series SX symbol that you can find on some games, and that's called Smart Delivery. Smart Delivery basically means that when you purchase a game with that technology built into it, no matter which Xbox you're playing on, it'll be optimized for that particular Xbox to run its best potential for your particular console. And that'll include exclusive Microsoft games, and in fact, Microsoft has opened up that technology to partner gaming studios so they can implement it into their games if they want to. One game that has that confirmed already is Cyberpunk 2077. So for example, if you were to buy Cyberpunk 2077 for Xbox One X and a few months later you get the Series X, you'll get the Series X version automatically for free with all the upgraded graphics and shebang and no extra cost. Smart Delivery is just a basic idea PC gamers have been using forever. You go from one PC to an upgraded one, and the games that carry over potentially get upped in graphics if it's allowed. It's not just graphics and frames per second that have been improved, but speed as well. As mentioned earlier, there's a 1TB SSD inside. With that SSD, the user gets 802 gigs available out of the box. Now 802 gigs sounds like a lot, but a lot of AAA titles tend to average about 80 to 100 gigs. And newer games like Call of Duty are going past the 120, past the 150 gig limit, so 802 gigs might run out rather quickly. Load times have been greatly improved thanks to the SSD. Gears 5 on Xbox One X was dreadfully long for loading times, but on Series X, I'm in the action way faster. Seriously though, thanks to the SSD and Smart Delivery in Gears 5, we get the additional frames per second, which means Marcus Phoenix has never looked so good and smooth. I just realized how that sounded, but you know what? I stand by my statement. Once you get used to the speed, it's difficult to go back to your older Xbox. You'll just want to sell it immediately and just stick with the Series X. A new feature that takes advantage of the SSD is Quick Resume, which allows you to have a few games open in the background at the same time. If you want to quickly switch to one of your previously open games, then go for it. You'll switch to that game exactly where you left off within a few seconds. No need to go to the game's main menu. This is great if you're in the middle of a solo campaign in one game and you get an invite from a friend to join them online in another game. Microsoft has said that the Series X is the most backwards compatible Xbox ever made. Just about every single Xbox One game is compatible with the Series X. Most 360 games and a good chunk of the original Xbox games are compatible with the Series X. This means that older games could take advantage of the upgraded technology and get improved frames per second. But that's not always the case, and it really depends on how old the game is. For example, Fable Anniversary Edition, which is from 2004, Xbox 360, has terrible frames per second rate. But this is not an Xbox Series issue, this is just simply because the game has not been optimized for higher frame rate. As of right now, there's no need to rush and get a Series X console. There are no exclusives, and most Xbox exclusives for the next couple of years will be available on the Xbox One consoles. As a media player, the Series X console is fairly strong. Apps such as Netflix, YouTube, and Amazon Prime work well and load incredibly fast. There's also Hulu, Disney Plus, and surprisingly, Apple TV. The main weakness here is the terrible Plex app. It struggles to load 4K home videos that have a fairly high bitrate, I do admit, at 60 megabytes per second. However, my Nvidia Shield can handle it just fine. This is not an issue with the console in any way or shape or form, it just means that the Plex app on the Series X was poorly designed. Still on the topic of media playback, Microsoft does list the Xbox as playing 8K HDR video, but I don't have any content to really test that with. Now when it comes to audio, it does support Dolby Digital 5.1, DTS 5.1, and Dolby True HD with Atmos. Look, the Series X is an incredible piece of hardware, especially in the gaming industry. If you really want to game on a console, this is definitely one worth checking out. There are no exclusives yet, so if you have an Xbox One, you don't have to rush, but you know, the faster load time, the better frames per second, the better graphics, and quick resume just makes it a pretty strong upgrade. Definitely worth checking out this console, as previous Xbox game consoles have always delivered in quality and quantity of games. So that's pretty much it for me. And do be sure to check out my PlayStation 5 review. The link to that will be available in the video description when it is up and live. And that's a wrap. So if you guys found this video useful, be sure to check out my social links in the video description. Hit that like button, it does help. Subscribe, and thanks for watching.